Welcome everyone to our presentation on 4D timeline simulation, Navisworks versus Twinmotion. My name is Vince Danielli. I'm a Building Solutions Team Manager here at Imaginate Technologies, and I specialize in architectural visualization.
And my name is Richard Krebling. I'm a solutions consultant on Vince's team, and I specialize in integrated solutions between building information models, scheduling, estimating, and job cost.
Thanks, Rich. So for today's presentation, we're going to start with a quick definition or explanation on what it is we're showing and what is 4D simulation. So essentially 4D simulation is sequencing 3D model content in a timeline. So we're tying time to the 3D model content. And the idea here is that we can visualize both the major and micro sequence of construction. And it gives us a good idea of what is occurring when, which ensures installation is coordinated, the project plan, and a 3-week look-ahead timeline. So we can actually find mistakes or find issues that could potentially lead to scheduling conflicts in a visual sense, where if you were looking at a spreadsheet in Excel, you might miss some things. So the ultimate goal here is that we can visualize all of this data in a way that makes sense. So when I mention data, we do have to manage this data. And why do we want to use a managed data approach for 4D? Well, the big things are, first, we never lose control of that data. We don't want to have to fight at some point in the project or the process of the project to regain control of our data, which leads to more time and more issues. We want to make sure that we increase the velocity in production, that business intelligence is derived from what we're doing, and we want to make sure, and this is probably the biggest thing, let's leave the heavy lifting to the machines. So let's make the computers do it. Ultimately, a better workflow leads to better communication, which will lead to better outcomes. Rich?
Thanks, Vince. So we have this managed data workflow for 4D concept that we want to emphasize today. We're going to use many different applications, but we want to derive horsepower from the data itself, as opposed to spending a lot of time selecting things individually with a mouse or manually building search sets. We can derive a lot of content that will stream from application to application if we play with an intelligent strategy. So I'll share my screen now and head into a demonstration of these applications in use. So here I'm viewing the Autodesk Hospital model, the architectural version of that, within Revit. Revit is a design authoring application. We will see 3D content and other applications downstream from here, but they are not model authoring platforms. They are visualization and model conditioning platforms. So as we proceed, I'm going to first publish this model to Navisworks. Navisworks is going to be my simulation environment in this exercise. Additionally, I'm going to publish my model from Revit to a software called Assemble that is part of the Autodesk Construction Cloud. From Assemble, I'm going to publish schedule activities, Navisworks selection sets, and bring it all back together in Navisworks. So let's review the Assemble application now. I just had that open, guys. I'm so sorry. So with the model pulled into Assemble, we can see an aggregated model inclusive of architecture, mechanical, plumbing, structure, and electrical. All of those individual discipline models are aggregated or federated, as we call it, into one model. And Assemble is very strong at both interpreting the model properties that come directly from Revit, but as well Assemble gives us an ability to mark up our own business intelligence, which is very valuable. So again, I can see lots of properties directly from the Revit model, but this I feel is design data, and we are trying to mark up intelligent information that's consistent with our other business practices and how we're intending to construct this particular project. We mark all that stuff up. That doesn't really come from the architect. That is our own business strategy and business intelligence that we're utilizing. If I go to a view of this model that uses some of that attribution, I'm able to see some color coding that represents construction sequencing. This building is, we're planning on building this in several segments, 1, 2, A, B, C, D, and E, different critical paths of vertical construction. I've been able to mark up that content, and I can see the beginning of my construction schedule that I'll utilize taking shape here, where I've got the buildings, and within each building, I can go down into a level, and here I can see schedule activities that I've marked up on my content. So Assemble also has the ability to pull raw data from the Assemble database using the Assemble Connect utility. Assemble proper will export Excel files all day long, but they're more like a report in that they're formatted for visual consumption. The data set that I'm looking at here is more like a flat file that's extracted from Assemble, and it is machine readable. I can import this content into Microsoft Project or P6 with subtle differences in the content. Like the duration convention in P6 is slightly different than Microsoft Project. So something to pay attention to. I can mark both of those formats up and Assemble. Additionally, I'm going to use Navisworks selection sets that I import via XML, and I should give you an example of a selection set here. I'm going to use the 3-week look ahead project, and if I click on I need to scroll down on this and get an exterior element so it's easier to see. I just saw a brick veneer. And that's not going to be in a place where it's very easy to see. At any rate, these selection sets enable me to very rapidly select content. And in Navisworks, in the simulation tools, there is an ability to attach selection sets to schedule tasks of the same name. Whenever I'm using a schedule simulation tool, I want to evaluate what's the opportunity to get the machine to do the heavy lifting by matching properties on my design content with properties in my schedule content so that there's an automatic link that creates here. Your alternative is manually selecting things with a mouse, and that can make schedule simulation a very arduous and time-consuming process that limits the practicality. So with data extracted and mapped and manually linked, I'm going to go to an example of the simulation of construction for this project. And this will run for about 90 seconds. We're starting with foundations. And you'll see structural steel start to emerge here shortly as we go from the different building segments delineated by virtual segments of construction. So you can see different trade spacing in a logical, orderly fashion through this simulation. And I want to reiterate that when I brought in my my search set content and my task content named the same, all of these elements automatically linked for this simulation. It's a tremendous time saver to approach this with a managed data type process. So we've just reviewed the construction master plan, and we've been able to identify that we have a sound sequence and we know our milestones. But in constructing a project, it's typical that we work with a 3-week look-ahead schedule, and that's the series of game time decisions that get made day in and day out to actually construct the project. When looking at the project through the lens of a 3-week look-ahead, we can see more detail. And as Vince spoke, conversations start happening that wouldn't otherwise happen when you can bring visual context of other people's work into place. If we were in a construction coordination meeting, we could see that we have exterior skin going on, we've got ductwork on the floor above, we have piping, there's stairs. We're beginning to have safety considerations for fall protection that must really be addressed. These stairs are going to require safety hand railings and whatnot. These conversations can start happening prompted by this type of visualization with a 3-week look-ahead schedule. So in a moment, Vince is going to show some more entertainment-grade visualization of the project and the sequence of construction using Twinmotion. I'm going to show how I provide content from Navisworks by way of FBX files that Vince uses in the Twinmotion simulation. With the selection sets that I have in Navisworks, I'm able to very easily select content, hide unselected, and I'll get out of task mode. There's my element, and now I can export to this FBX file type that Vince will use in his presentation for some more entertainment grade visualization.
All right, thanks, Rich. So yeah, as Rich mentioned there, once we've isolated those selection sets, it makes things a lot easier to bring them into Twinmotion, make them maybe more visually appealing for presentation or more, like he mentioned, entertainment quality. So we can do a little bit more in Twinmotion than what we were getting from just simply the Navisworks. So I would say that Navisworks has its own place in doing that 3-week look ahead, and it does a really nice job of tracking the actual timeline visually. But Twinmotion is just going to give us a more popping sort of presentation quality, and we can do stuff like place more realistic equipment, put people in the site, and start to build the context of the site. So maybe not as informational as the Navisworks simulation, but definitely has its own place in maybe marketing materials or trying to sell the construction sequence to a landowner or the owner of the project. So something that is more striking visually and maybe gets them a little bit more engaged in the project. But also one thing that Twinmotion does a really great job of, and I'll show this, is we can also navigate through this model and get right in there and do maybe a little bit more of an immersive experience and get to things like VR, something that's not a capability of the Navisworks simulation. So with that, we did use an FBX exchange going from Navisworks into Twinmotion. I do want to point out that Twinmotion, or the Unreal Engine, which Twinmotion is built on top of, does have a plugin for Navisworks called the Datasmith Exporter. So we can do the same thing with the Datasmith Exporter. We can isolate those selection sets and export them out individually as Datasmith files rather than FBX. And essentially, we're getting that same information. Datasmith is a proprietary file exchange for the Unreal Engine. So it does carry a bit of extra data with it. So if we even wanted to expand on what we're getting in Twinmotion, bring it into the Unreal Engine and make it more of an interactive model, or do maybe more construction management, something we're not getting into in this presentation, there might be some additional data that we can derive from that datasmith. So I just want to put that out there because there are multiple ways we can exchange this information in a clean format from Navisworks. So as we can see here in Twinmotion, this is my import dialog, or my import palette at the bottom, and showing all of the individual FBXs. So Rich did most of the heavy lifting, or let the computers do the heavy lifting on the Navisworks side. There is a little bit of manual process here. We did have to import each of these individual FBX files into Twinmotion in order to have them separated out this way, so that we can manage them for phasing. So one thing I'll point out here is that as we're importing these files in Twinmotion, we have this thing called the scene graph. And the scene graph is what shows all of those different FBX files, and we can manually control the visibility of these objects inside of Twinmotion, which is great because if we don't want to see something, we can, let's see, something that's showing here, maybe the, I don't know if we're going to see anything because we're looking at the exterior, but as we turn these things off, or on and off, you'll see that they do disappear. Let me see. This one definitely will show. So if we look at this limestone cladding in this area, if I change or turn this off, you can see that the limestone cladding goes away. So we can manually turn these off. And the whole idea behind the selection sets is that we're really just isolating those selections and assigning them to an individual FBX. So I'll get into what the phasing controls look like. So inside of Twinmotion, in our media section, this is where we go to create any form of media for output, images, panoramas, videos, and then we do have this phasing option. So this was a new feature back in Twinmotion 2020. I am in Twinmotion 2021 now, but the feature is the same between both programs. So this is what we're looking at. This is our phasing tool. So if I go and I just open up the phasing right away, we'll see that our timeline starts at April 6th. We do have this sort of initial site, and just for visualization purposes, we created a surface plane, set it below grade, just so we could see the foundation elements being put in. There'd be other ways you could visualize this, maybe making the initial ground surface transparent. I tried a few different things. I think this one kind of portrays what we're trying to do well, but you could probably figure out a better way of showing anything underground. We could cut a hole out of the site and show the foundation being poured, but just for the sake of this practice, you'll get the idea here. So with phasing, you'll see that we do have all of these additional tracks. So we created tracks that align with the selection sets, and then within those tracks, we can actually set a duration for that element to be visible. So for example, all of these tracks match up to the naming conventions from the selection sets in Navisworks, and with these tracks, we can have them start visibility and then end visibility. So you'll see that some of them start and end before the end of the project because there are certain things that we want to show up and disappear. But then other things, if I scrub this whole timeline here, go all the way to our end date, which in this case was right around January 1st or December 31st, whatever, right around that time. That's the end of the project. We just want to make sure everything is lined up to that end date. So what's great about this is the data, because of the work that Rich did in Navisworks, it makes it much easier to configure this timeline in Twinmotion because of those isolated selection sets. If I were to bring in that entire hospital project as one Revit model, imported as a single FBX or through a datasmith exchange, it would take me so many additional man hours in order to parse through that model, change the visibility of objects, assign them to specific phases. With this particular workflow, we're eliminating that manual breakdown of the model because we've already done that in another software. So yes, there is time that it takes to create these separate FBX files, and there is time that it takes to put this together in a timeline, but ultimately, this whole process might take a couple of hours versus going through that model individually, piece by piece, element by element, and isolating those parts. And one of the things we mentioned early in the presentation is that managed data. By making sure that we have that aggregated data and those selection sets are really concise, we realize that when we bring it into a program like Twinmotion and it's basically clustered under one selection set here, we know that there are certain elements that we don't need to worry about potentially user error and having, say, ductwork turned on when we're trying to show piping installed. So this keeps everything very organized. We're not losing data, which is the biggest point of this whole process, is that we're streamlining the data, we're not losing data, and this workflow can be consistent from your different phases of your project management. So anyway, the visualization part is kind of secondary. Once we have it in here, we can do a whole bunch of stuff like assign materials and change the environment. But really what's happening is if I start to really scrub this timeline, just like Rich was showing in Navisworks, we can see that building being put together in this construction timeline in the same way. So this looks really, really close to what we were getting in Navisworks. Yes, it doesn't really show that sort of preview and then install like Navisworks does with that transparent green to the opaque material, but it still comes across as the building is being put together correctly and we're putting this together in the appropriate phases. So this is really great that we can scrub this timeline. We can see the scaffolding, the temporary scaffolding showing up, disappearing, construction equipment showing up, going away, different people. It starts to just give you that real sense of context of the site. And we're just using a small chunk of the hospital for this, but you could definitely do this with a very large building. And Twinmotion does a great job of managing large geometry. So this is actually a pretty small site compared to what Twinmotion can handle. Now, once it's set up in the phasing sequence, we can then go to a video, or we can set that phase to a video, and we can sort of plan a camera sequence out, or we can travel around the building and watch that phasing. So what I'll just do really quickly, like Rich did with inside of Navisworks and simulating that in an animation, I'll just show you the difference here between what we can get, what type of quality we're getting from Navisworks versus this, what we're getting from Twinmotion. And this is really easy. I just have two keyframes here, a start and a finish, over 30 seconds. I didn't do anything too crazy with the cameras, but you absolutely could have multiple camera views set up. You could transition from keyframe to keyframe. So you can do a lot of things here, but I'll just show you and pay attention to not only the elements appearing and disappearing, but also sort of the environment changing as this video plays. So you get the concrete trucks, foundation being poured, things disappear. I made sure that the sun was moving through the scene, so we kind of see this cascading shadow, the stretching of the shadow, giving the false impression that this is happening maybe in a day, but it gives that sense of movement of time. So it's kind of a cool effect that we can see here within Twinmotion. And that's really it. 30-second video. We could stretch that out to be longer. If we wanted to create additional video parts or just additional videos in general, we could do that very easily because this is all set up now. So this was just one example, but if you wanted to take the perspective of interior or inside the building or see what's happening inside the building and add that to the video, you can navigate around here, you can go into the building and show all of those things. So it does a really great job. One thing I should also point out, all of these little site assets that I have placed here. These are just construction equipment out of the box with Twinmotion. We have these elements. So, oops, back up here. Yeah, under vehicles, we have construction stuff. You may have noticed that the crane that I had there is kind of not the best looking. Well, that one actually came from Navisworks. So I just wanted to show there if I back up in the timeline here to where that yeah, this crane is really strictly 3D geometry. But this is pulled in from Navisworks. So if you don't want to take the time to actually place more realistic equipment, you can use the equipment from whatever your authoring programs are. So, and you can download content, you can build your own content in other programs like 3ds Max, build your own asset libraries in Twinmotion. But really the focus of this presentation is on this whole phasing and the elimination of data loss between these different programs in this workflow. So one last thing I want to show here, we animated the phasing in the video. We can actively move around the project. If you wanted to, you could always get into one button to VR. So if you do have a VR headset like an HTC Vive or an Oculus Rift, you can plug it into your computer, click this button while you have Twinmotion open, and that will translate it into the headset so you can view it in the headset and navigate around. And so it kind of looks like this, but that timeliner is present in VR. So you could move into different parts of the building, teleport onto a certain floor, see where your pipe is being installed, where equipment is being placed. So you get that real sense, that immersive sense of the space. So it's really putting you in the context of the building, which is, I think, a great way to communicate the visual. And there's probably a lot more benefit to that than we might realize, comparing it to just looking at a timeline on a spreadsheet, something like that. So one last thing, and this kind of goes along with what I was showing here. We process this, so Twinmotion does now in 2021, has a capability of pushing our design or pushing our project up to a cloud presenter. What's great about the cloud presenter, let me just open this here. Oops, it's freezing up. Uh-oh. All right, caught back up there. What's great about the cloud presenter, so we can push this to the cloud. And what it does is it processes it, and it does take a few minutes, but really not as long as you would think. We can share this out to other people on our team to view. They do not have to have Twinmotion. All they have to have is this link. It will bring them to this little web portal, and then they are able to view the cloud presenter from a web browser. So it might take it a second here to open this. But they have that full capability of navigating through the model, scrubbing the timeline. They can manually adjust the time of the day to see shadow effects. But what's great is it does include that whole phasing timeline here. So we can share this out to anyone. They don't have to have a great computer in order to view this. We ran this as a test internally at Imagineit. So some of our more admin level people or management level people that don't have the best workstation computers, we tested this out. I shared it to my boss who has an integrated graphics card in his computer. He's never been able to open Twinmotion and work through scenes because his computer just can't handle it. Well, I could share this link out to him. He was able to do everything that we're able to see here, and it looked exactly the same. So really, really awesome. And as you can see, so this is all in the cloud. I'm not in Twinmotion, the desktop application right now. I'm on the cloud. I'm able to share this out to anyone. We can scrub the timeline. We can play the sequence. We can store additional points of reference within the model if we want to. So right now I only have the one thumbnail, but you could have multiple thumbnails in different positions of the building. So we're not limited to just this one thumbnail. I mentioned you can change time of the day, so you can do little shadow studies in real time through the cloud, and you can navigate through this model. The one thing you can't do through the internet, at least I don't think you can do this, but it doesn't have a VR button here. But everything else, the phasing, the time, the navigation around the model, you can do all of this stuff. So we can share this out. This is something that no other program that I know of can do this quite as well, through a cloud presentation. But stand in the hallway here, see that building and it construct around you. So really, really great stuff. And I would say that concludes our 4D simulation on Navisworks versus Twinmotion. Thank you everyone for joining our session. We hope you learned some valuable information about data exchange between Navisworks into Twinmotion. And feel free to connect with Rich and I on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you very much.